Hi guys, so you may see sometimes on Instagram I go through some client results and case studies, obviously anonymously, and I ask for permission before doing so. But I thought it'd be good for me to just run through one in a bit more detail, showing a bit about the protocol that I recommend for a client that I started working with, I think, November. And we've just got the latest results from her stool test and hormone test, and things are looking pretty good. And her number one concern was acne. So I'm going to share my screen and then we'll just have a bit of an overview on her main concern. So she's female, she was 27 when we first started working together. She's a full-time teacher, so quite a stressful job, as you can imagine. And she's been struggling with symptoms since she was 16. She's had a high antibiotic usage in her life due to her skin and also infections that she used to have in her throat, so tonsillitis, and she had her tonsils removed in childhood because of that. She was diagnosed with PCOS age 17 due to her skin issues. Her acne was also spreading to her back at that point, and also her irregular cycles, so she had 2 out of 3 criteria to be diagnosed with PCOS. And for the past year or so, she's been eating a paleo style diet, and that's given her some improvements, but she's still struggling with symptoms. So the first session was in November of 2019, and I asked her to score her symptoms. I do this with all my clients on a scale 0 to 6. So 0 is the best that it can be, not really a problem at all. 6 is the worst. So with her acne, that was her number one concern, and that was a 6 out of 6. Anxiety was a 5 out of 6, and she had acid reflux as well, which was also a 5 out of 6. So in protocol number 1, I first recommended her to remove dairy. So even though she was eating a paleo style diet, she was still including full fat dairy products, organic and all of that good stuff, but and only eating on occasion. But I suspected a dairy sensitivity because of her long-term issues with tonsillitis and immune issues and skin issues, just those things pointing me towards thinking of a dairy sensitivity. So I asked her to remove dairy. She was already gluten-free. If not, I would have recommended her to remove gluten at that point. Mindful eating, and it sounds very basic and boring, but very important with any digestive issues, particularly reflux, because if you're not chewing your food, breaking your food down in your mouth, then you're more likely to struggle with bacterial imbalances, nutrient malabsorption, so you're not breaking down and absorbing your food correctly, and it could be the best diet in the world, but you could still be struggling. So chewing your food really well, and also not eating when stressed, not eating when you're rushed, taking your time, all of that people tend to avoid. Stress management, because the fact that she is a teacher and had a lot going on, just trying to add in mindful moments throughout the day. So in between classes, she would do some deep breathing, she would drink herbal teas, and then before work and after work, she'd do a little kind of meditation practice and breathing exercises to calm her down. And I also recommended her to do some testing, and she did have the budget to do some tests, which some people don't, but she wanted to just get some answers because she'd been struggling with this for a while now. So I recommended her to do a GI map stool test and also a Dutch hormone test. So that's a urine test that looks at your stress hormones and also your sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and male hormones like androgens. And supplements, I wanted her to get started with just a couple, because I sometimes like to wait until we get some lab results back to really tailor the supplement protocol. And none of these recommendations will apply to you. Even if you have some of these symptoms, you need to work with someone to figure out what's going on, and always check with your practitioner or your doctor if you have health issues or you're taking a medication, because they could be contraindicated. So just a basic magnesium, a magnesium glycinate to help with her anxiety, help with gut motility, so any reflux, constipation, it can sometimes improve with magnesium. And magnesium's involved with over 500 things in the body, so I think she really needed some magnesium, as most people do. And after she completed the stool test, I wanted her to begin taking some digestive enzymes, because taking them too soon before the sample, it can actually affect one of the results on there. So she went ahead and ordered them, and as soon as she'd done the stool sample, she started to take the enzymes before every meal, just to help her break down her healthy foods and absorb the nutrients a bit better. So I got the results for her stool test back a couple of weeks later, and I've screenshotted them because otherwise I'd have to scroll through and you'd be able to see the names. So just for confidentiality, I screenshotted the results. So we'll start with one of the first pages of the GI map. So you can see at the top, she was positive for a bacteria called H. pylori, which is a common bacteria. A lot of people have it, not everyone is symptomatic. So if she had it present, but not elevated, she didn't have any symptoms, any signs of imbalance like reflux that she had or acne, hormone imbalances, then sometimes I don't actually treat H. pylori. But the fact that she is symptomatic and it was elevated, I did want to put her on some herbs and things to help get rid of the H. pylori, because this suppresses stomach acid and can therefore affect the rest of your digestion and also your nutrient levels. So you could be taking supplements, but if you've got weak stomach acid, you could be eating a great diet, but you may not be fully benefiting from that. And then further down here, you can see there's some imbalances in her good bacteria. So even though it's good bacteria, too much can be a problem as well and can cause gas, bloating, those types of things. That's page 1. Page 2, again, a lot of things in the red zone, some in the dysbiotic category, the first section, and these aren't pathogens necessarily, but in excess amounts or when there's too many of them and your immune system suppressed, then that can lead to symptoms. So they can produce LPS or lipopolysaccharide, also known as endotoxin, which can directly lead to leaky gut. She had some autoimmune triggers present, so Citrobacter, quite a few actually, Klebsiella, Prevotella, and Fusobacterium. These are correlated with autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, Hashimoto's. So some people have them present, again, not symptomatic. We also have to look at family history, your current lifestyle, but they can be problematic, especially in excess and with this many elevated. I suspected they were contributing to some of her symptoms, and she did have a family history of rheumatoid arthritis, so we did want to make sure that these were cleaned up as quick as possible. And then last one here was fungus and yeast. So she had some candida present, and I don't see the GI map being the best to pick up yeast, in my opinion. Sometimes an organic acid test would be recommended in that case to fully assess yeast levels, and sometimes the GI map comes back normal, but the organic acid test comes back quite elevated. So whenever I see candida on a stool test, I know it's definitely a big factor and it's definitely causing some issues, even though it's not elevated. So candida is a normal part of the gut flora, but when your immune system's suppressed, when the rest of your gut flora is out of whack, when your stomach acid's low, then it can cause issues and can lead to anxiety and bloating and skin issues, sometimes thrush in the mouth, in the vagina. So again, wanting to tackle this one. And then last one on the test is a bit on her intestinal health. So she didn't have any parasites or worms, but her intestinal health, although these look normal, there's a few imbalances just because of the reference ranges on the test aren't that accurate in my opinion. So elastase was quite low, even though the reference range is 200. I'd want that to be over 500 for optimal health. And that would be a reflection of pancreatic enzymes, intestinal enzymes, and stomach acid all combined. Her beta-glucuronidase was pretty good, so that is an enzyme that can sometimes recirculate estrogen in the bowels, so we can rule that out as being a problem. There was no blood. Immune system was a little bit weak. Again, the reference range only starts at 500, but I'd want to see that in the thousands. She was at 634, so that's secretory IgA. It's like a thick mucus that lines the entire digestive tract and protects the gut from becoming leaky. It houses the good bacteria, so that's where they live. So obviously we want that nice and strong. And hers was a little bit suppressed. I see that being due to stress. So mental and emotional stress because of her job, but also having H. pylori and bacterial imbalances that can also worsen this. There's a marker for potential gluten sensitivity, so that's the anti-gliadin antibody, but because she wasn't regularly eating gluten, then this isn't accurate. And then finally, calprotectin is a marker of inflammation in the gut. The closer to 0, the better. 173 is the upper limit, but I see that being way too high, so we want that to be as low as possible, and hers was a 3. So quite good, and her immune system was doing a good job at keeping inflammation in check, despite everything that was going on. So on to the second session, which was a month later, and her acne had reduced a little bit. So before we even treated any of her gut, her acne had improved. I think that's because she removed dairy. Her anxiety improved, I think, due to the stress management she was working on, maybe the magnesium, and her reflux had improved a little bit as well, again, from maybe the stress management, mindful eating, and the removal of dairy. So the recommendations this time would be based on the lab results. So I asked her to complete an 8-week gut restore protocol. I'm not going to go fully into that because it's a little bit different, again, depending on what was going on, but some herbs in there to help clear the H. pylori, to help bring down the bacterial levels and get rid of the autoimmune triggers. So a combination of herbs, digestive enzymes she continued with, some spore-based probiotics. So they actually help to implant into the gut and reduce levels of bad bacteria, improve levels of good bacteria. So unlike other ones that just kind of feed and fuel the fire if there's any bacterial overgrowth, the spore-based probiotics, and I like the brand Microbiome Labs, they actually help to just go into the gut and really understand what's going on and just normalize everything. And I forgot to go through the Dutch results actually. So we also did a Dutch test, which is a urine test for hormones. And you can see at the top, this is just an overview of her estrogen. She had very high estrogen levels and very low progesterone. So she hadn't ovulated that month. And that would classify her as estrogen dominant or estrogen dominant. And I think that's why her skin wasn't great, and her anxiety and skin did worsen around her cycle as well. She had quite low testosterone, so that to me indicates either a zinc deficiency or inflammation and stress in the body, which kind of makes sense. Her cortisol levels, so metabolized cortisol, the bottom right dial, that's how much cortisol her body produces. And you can see hers is on the high end of normal. Same with the free cortisol. And DHEA was quite elevated as well. And that's a hormone that's produced by the adrenals to try and offset some of the negative effects of cortisol. So it's also a pro-hormone, so it gives birth, if you will, to your estrogen and your androgens in the system. So this is where the PCOS type symptoms could come in. And throughout the day, her pattern of cortisol was pretty good, but there was points in the afternoon that particular day that was quite elevated. And then the rest of her tests, let me just make this bigger. So we've seen this top right-hand section with the progesterone that she wasn't ovulating that month, maybe due to the PCOS, stress, gut infections. And then she had some elevations in androgens, ethylcolanolone, androsterone, and also we've seen the low levels of testosterone. Estrogen dominant, so very high levels of estrogen. Her metabolization of estrogen was actually quite good. She was going down the green pathway, the majority. So you can see it in this pie chart. Expected between 60 and 80% to be going down the 2OH pathway, which is considered the healthy estrogen metabolism pathway, so that's good. And her methylation was quite good as well. And even though this looks like everything's high, it's just because her overall estrogen level was elevated. So we want this dial to be in the white zone or leaning more towards the right for methylation. That's showing that she's clearing her hormones out of the system. So because of the Dutch result as well, I asked her to increase her intake of anti-inflammatory foods. Some common ones would be dark leafy green vegetables, some herbs and spices like turmeric, ginger, but everyone's a little bit different in terms of food sensitivity. She did have noticed some other food sensitivities that were a problem for her. And this was to support her hormones and the testosterone being low and the estrogen dominance. I also asked her to work on her circadian rhythm, so her body clocks, to help with her menstrual cycle. So being in touch with nature and the sunlight and sunset, blocking blue light in the evening, wearing blue light blocking glasses. I recommend the brand Blue Blocks. BLUBLOX, and I've got a discount code Hormones. Use that and you get 15% discount at checkout. And supplements, I asked her to continue with the enzymes without HCl, so without any stomach acid in there, because she had the H. pylori. Spore-based probiotics, as I mentioned, antimicrobial support, adrenal support to help bring down that cortisol level and just support her stress, and a high-strength omega-3 to help reduce inflammation and also support her androgens. So it helps to regulate androgen levels, reduce inflammation, and just make sure it's a really high-quality fish oil and keep that refrigerated. So after about 8 weeks, then we had the third session, which was around February 2020. And we did the scoring system. Initially, she said her acne had worsened because of the herbs she was taking, and there was a lot of changes going on, and she did get some kind of die-off reactions, very minor, so just some bloating. Her skin got a little bit worse, but after a few days, it normalized again and actually improved. So acne was now a 3. Her anxiety was really improved this time. So I think clearing out some of those gut bugs was helping with her anxiety and her mood. She was still dealing with some mild reflux at a 2 out of 6, but that had also improved, so everything was on the right track. So then the focus was on a bit of restoration to her gut, because these herbs can be less harsh than antibiotics, but they can still cause some inflammation, especially things like garlic and oregano. So we continue with the spore-based probiotics, added some prebiotics in terms of food. Gut healing support, so she was fine with things like bone broth and collagen. Some people aren't, like myself, so we just had to be careful with that, but she did really well with some homemade bone broth every day, and some mucilaginous herbs like slippery elm, marshmallow to help calm down that inflammation of the gut and help repair the gut lining. I always focus on liver detoxification after a gut protocol, because the liver can get backed up and burdened with any gut infections. So I always do some liver detoxification support with dry body brushing. She had access to a sauna near where she lived, so she did the sauna daily. Coffee enemas, she was open to doing those, which I found very effective. And castor oil packs to help with estrogen dominance and just getting her cycle a little bit regular. And other times in the month, she placed that on her liver. Supplement wise, we discontinued the antimicrobials at this point. You don't want to be taking them for too long, but it depends on how severe the overgrowth was. We continue with the probiotics. We added in a supplement called NAC, which is N-acetylcysteine. It's the precursor to glutathione. It's rich in sulfur, so it helps with the liver detoxification, and it's great for helping with high androgen levels. We then swapped the digestive enzymes for hydrochloric acid supplements, now that H. pylori was hopefully clear, and inflammation was reduced a little bit. You don't want to go in with HCl when you have a H. pylori infection that's active, because it can cause just inflammation and gastritis in some cases. So we swapped the enzymes over. She did HCl, and then I also added in ginger to support her gut motility and also to reduce inflammation of the gut. And I asked her to retest her stool in a couple of weeks, so do a GI map retest. And it would be, I do recommend that she did a Dutch test again, but I asked her to do that in a few months, because it takes a while to complete, and it takes a bit longer for your hormones to really notice a change. So we'll now look at the GI map retest. So at this point, her H. pylori was clear. So that's great. The things that we did worked. Her bacteria was looking much better, so we eliminated one of the elevated species that she had. Her dysbiotic bacteria was leaking pretty good as well. Her autoimmune triggers were no longer elevated, and she had still Prevotella present. Fusobacterium I see very commonly anyway, so I'm not too concerned about that. So we were going to continue with probiotics and things ongoing, so hopefully the Prevotella would be eradicated, but in very small numbers, and the fact that it wasn't elevated and she was feeling better, then that was a good sign we were on track. Candida was no longer present. Still no parasites or worms. Her steatocrit was now elevated, so this is a marker of fat malabsorption, so I'm not quite sure what went on here. I think she actually started eating a bit more fat in the diet from when she first did the test, so it could be that she's always had this issue, but now because she's eating more fat, it's just showing. So we were then going to support her liver and gallbladder in a bit more, and bile in a bit more detail. Her elastase, as you can see, was much improved from 200 that it was previously, up into that normal range. Her secretory IgA, so her immune system marker, was in the thousands range now, which we want to see. This is showing that her immune system's nice and strong, and in such a short amount of time as well. That's a big improvement. It can sometimes take 6 to 12 months to really notice a difference. And her inflammation marker was a little bit more elevated. I think it's just because of the work that we were doing on the gut, and it is just a snapshot in time after all. With this marker, like if you ate something the night before that didn't agree, or your body's fighting something off in your food, then you could get a slight elevation. So I'm not too concerned. It's definitely nowhere near inflammatory bowel level, but a little bit elevated. So the plan of action at that point, well, let's first do the scoring system. So this was now April. GI map test really improved since the first time we did it. Acne was now a 1. Her anxiety was a 0, so completely gone. Reflux was a 0, no longer struggling with that. I think because the H. pylori had gone and we were now doing the stomach acid. So we were going to focus more on the gallbladder bile side of things because she had some mild fat malabsorption. She now wanted some information on how to improve her skin topically because she was dealing with some hyperpigmentation and redness from previous acne scars and marks. So I formulated a non-toxic skincare routine for her. We shared some tips on how to support the vagus nerve. And then she let me know that she was wanting to try and conceive within the next few months. So she wanted some information about fertility and also the fertility awareness method and how to optimize egg health, all of that. So that's what we were moving on to and are going to be focusing on for the next couple of months. So this client was very happy with the results from just the 5 months that we're working together, which for someone with acne is a really quick response because some people it takes much longer. But the fact that she put in the hard work, it really did pay off, and I'm really happy with that. So let me know if you enjoyed this, if you want to see more of these case studies, and if you've got any questions, you can leave them below.